Welcome to the May 27, 2026 meeting of the Administration Committee of the Agribusiness Development Corporation. I am the Chair, David Hinazumi. Prior to calling to the meeting to order, Ken Nakamura will explain how the public can participate in this hybrid meeting, which can be accessed by video conference, telephone, or in person.
Okay, for those of you joining online, your microphones will automatically be muted. When the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen to indicate that you wish to testify about that agenda item. The chairperson will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the chairperson, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you have finished speaking. For those of you joining by phone, when the chairperson asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering star and then 9. A voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the chairperson, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you have finished speaking, please enter star and then 6 again to mute yourself. For both internet and phone, as well as in-person access, when testifying, you'll be asked to identify yourself and organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 2 minutes of testimony per agenda item.
Thank you, Ken. This meeting is called to order at 10:04 a.m. I will take a roll call of the committee members present. When your name is called, please verbally acknowledge your presence and state who, if anyone over the age of 18, is present in the room with you. This also serves as a roll call vote. For each subsequent vote, I will ask if there are any objections or abstentions. If there are none, then the motion will be approved on the same basis as this initial roll call. Member Hinazumi, myself present and alone. Member Kahahani is excused. Member Watts.
Present and alone.
Member Wicker.
Present alone.
Okay. Acknowledge that we do have a quorum for today's meeting. Members are reminded to have their cameras turned on and remain on screen during the meeting, especially during the vote, so the record will clearly reflect who was present at the time the vote was taken. Okay, moving on to agenda item B1, approval of minutes. There are none to be approved today. Moving on to agenda item C1, action items. Review fiscal year 2026 budget and actuals, status update regarding the fiscal year 2027 budget, update on active contracts and projects, and preliminary agency budget planning for fiscal years 2028 and 2029. As fiscal year 2028 represents the first year of the upcoming biennium budget cycle, the budget planning and recommendations will address funding and operational needs for both fiscal years 2028 and 2029. The committee will discuss milestones and priorities in order to provide the agency's board of directors with a report and recommendation regarding fiscal year 2028 and 2029 budget matters. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to testify?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Are there any objections to the posting of the submittals for today's meeting?
No objection seen, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Staff, do we have a report on this?
Chair, did you want to start with fiscal year 26 or did you want to jump to fiscal year 28? What's your preference?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. Let's start with the 2028-2029 budget. That's a priority that the committee needs to review. We've talked about the cadence that we want to follow, get this in front of our committee. At this point, we'll have discussion, and we ultimately want to get this to the full board by the June meeting.
If you would possibly turn to page 41 in the submittal package, And that
Oh.
will take us directly to the operational requests.
Did you want me to share the screen?
Yes,
That'd be
please,
great.
please do.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Chair, the staff took the position, per conversations with you, to focus on the portfolio that we currently have, the assets that we currently have, and to prioritize what we currently have and taking care of that, prior to adding additional roles and responsibilities. And we'd like to just go through the list, and it is with a few changes in the priority order. So number one would be the first priority represented by the staff towards the board. And would you like me to just go through the entire operational requests and then have discussion, or would you like to discuss it one by one? What's your preference?
Well, what we can do, so okay, so to follow up on what you just stated, what I had posed to staff is just checking where we are today. That's the first step in this process. Where are we today? How many projects do we have, and what kind of support do we need to manage what we currently have? And then, of course, looking towards the future, we also need to be cognizant of what we are going to need to take on new projects. With that said, the requests we have right now total, almost 50 requests. And so they are broken up into these categories that we see. And within each category, my understanding is that these are prioritized. But then also overall, amongst all the categories, we need to know what the priorities are, making sure we've got a clear understanding of the absolute priorities to continue our operations, continue moving projects forward, and prioritize, all of these together, of the 49, okay, what are our absolute priorities that we need. So what I'd asked for is to touch upon that now. And just top 10 is just an example I threw out. So why don't we just walk through this with the absolute priorities amongst all of these items, and then our members can have further discussion on whether they should be within the top, priorities, whether we should, move something, from the lower group up into the, priorities. So just touch on the priorities, and then we can have further discussion from there.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So under the operational requests, the number one priority is it's a job description that's called a program specialist, which is kind of a misnomer for what actually that position does. So the position actually writes very detailed RFP specs in regards to construction projects, in regards to software projects and purchasing. And the way that we are currently operating, our project manager is working on these very detailed specs in addition to project management. And it is a role that we've seen within other DBED agencies that is very, very specific. And it, generally speaking, will allow for a much more detailed bid. Instead of having when you have broader specs, then people automatically think it could be, much greater. And so the bid numbers come in higher than what they needed to be. And so given the number of projects, the number of details for each project, the staff prioritized the program specialist as being number one. And the number two priority is the senior project manager, with the intention that the senior project manager would not be an outside hire, but would provide upward mobility for current staff, for the project manager to move into a senior project manager role, and then to add an additional project manager given the number of projects and details that need to be managed. The number three is a water system admin, and that position basically becomes customer service for all of the Wahiwa irrigation system customers in addition to the Waihole customers. But more importantly, they also will add the job description of having the responsibility for organizing the safety training for equipment and for PPE. And that is not something that we currently have covered. In the last 2 years, we have had 2 individuals go out with on-the-job injuries, and one individual has been out for almost 2 years. And this position takes care of the staff that we currently have by providing a level of training in safety that has been missing. And if we had to just look at all of the items and we had to only pick 3, those would be the top 3 that we would choose out of this category. Should I pause at this point, Chair, or do you want me to go through all of them? We tried to just be specific on if we could only have a few and not everything, what would we choose?
Yes, I think this is good for now, and let's check with our members if there's any comments about these positions, or if they saw some other positions mentioned that we think we should be moved up. Okay. If
I
there's
just had one question. Sorry, it's okay to go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Wendy, I just had a question. So these salaries are, how did you guys get these salaries?
So the salaries represent fringe in addition to the salary.
So like, okay. So for like these 3 positions, what would be the salary and then the fringe?
So about, I would say 40% would be fringe, 60% would be salary.
Wouldn't the salary isn't fringe at like 60% now?
That's why I was just thinking if it had flipped. So I think now that you mention it, Deputy Director, it is 60% fringe and 40% is the salary.
So then if you take it that way, some of these, were the salaries researched then? So that's what the
Yes.
industry pays? Okay.
Well, it was researched inside of what state positions were paying, but not what is happening in the industry as a whole.
Well, that's why I'm asking what the salary is, because it would be kind of like if you had a water system administrative services manager, I think 164,000 would be a difficult number to justify. That's a high for an administrative services manager, right? If you were looking at a more executive level title, I could see that, but right, because I don't know if you have to line this up with a civil service position, I don't think they make anywhere near that, right?
No, what I'm saying is that you may see 160,000, but it isn't 160,000.
No, I understand that, because you're asking for revolving funds. These are all W funds, right? So, but what I'm asking is what the actual dollar amounts are. So like administrative service manager, what's the salary and what's the fringe?
So for example, should I start at the top one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so the top one, the salary is, if you take 60% fringe, it's like 34K.
Is that even above?
34K in salary?
Yeah.
Isn't like minimum wage
specialist?
And if you take like 180,000 and you take that times the 40%, that's only a $72,000 a year job. The balance of that is fringe. But when we ask, we have to ask for the amount of the salary plus the fringe.
No, so I understand. So 34K on the program specialist, 72K for the project manager, and what was the third one?
So that would be 64K.
Okay. Right, because I think, well, I know, like, for like the private sector, project managers alone make way more than $72,000 a year. So I'm just, what I'm trying to get at, Wendy, is how realistic these salaries are, and how you expect to recruit when you know what I mean, like a project manager in a regular company would probably make upwards of $90,000 to $100,000 starting.
Or are these the actual salaries without reflecting fringe?
Yeah. Or that, yes.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that these included the fringe. We
I
were gonna
believe-
make it senior
I believe
project manager
that's
180K.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, but I don't think the percentage.
But I think we might have reversed the percentages, so it was like 180,000 times, 60%. So then you would have a senior project manager at 108.
Well, no, I guess, but
Yeah,
no,
no. So
because
I think the
I think like
calculation-
I can tell you right now, I could see a senior project manager making upwards of 150 to 180,000.
yeah.
And so if that's the salary, then the fringe, everything else would be like in the 200s, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think I think the calculation, it's not 60% of this is fringe. I think what it is you take the salary and you multiply that by the 62%, and that becomes the fringe. So it's not truly 60%, 40%, right? It's you're multiplying the salary times 60%, then you're adding it to the salary. So it's not so that's in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what do you multiply this by? But I kind of think that's how it was calculated. So there was a salary, it's probably like 120, and then you multiply that by 60%, excuse me, and then you'd add it to the 120, and then you'd get that 180. It's something like that. I don't think it's a 60-40. Yeah.
Well, if you guys can true that up and get back to the committee.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What was I going to say? So what was my question? So as these are revolving funded, how are they being paid for? Do we have these funds available, or what's the strategy to raise the funds to pay for these positions?
So that's, if I may.
Yep.
So as part of this, this discussion and this process, we really wanted to make sure that the board also provides direction. So we might be able to request these positions through, let's say, general funds. But the other side of it is many times we're really looking at revolving funds. So the deputy, your question is correct, is do we have the funds to do this? And we may or we may not. So we're looking at these from a priority standpoint, where the board will tell us, okay, these are important. Can we afford it? And we're gonna have to continue working through this process and provide more detail for certain. I can see that. And and sometimes you might look at some of these things and you might say, you know what, we should be requesting this as general funds, not increase in ceiling to spend, for revolving funds, right? And so or the board might say, this is very important, but don't request this as don't put this in as a legislative request through DBID, just put it in as a, but if you have the money, then you guys go ahead and, proceed on this. So,
Well, I think-
as a follow-up to this is we do have to create that list of, of those lists so that the board can provide that kind of direction to staff.
Going through priority positions 1 through 5. Okay. My thought is with senior project manager and construction manager, these would be justified as long as EDC is undertaking current projects as well as new projects, because you're going to need somebody to manage the Gantt charts, manage the project timetables, and then somebody who has the construction manager expertise to do that oversight. Also, one of them will have to probably play a legacy role in having the context of what's happened in the past to where we're heading in the future. I would explore the option of doing a fee charge for every construction or CIP project to help pay for those two salaries. So you're not asking for general fund. But then that also pushes then the manager, as both managers, to say, okay, what projects in the strategic plan do we have for each county? And pencil out, okay, we got to ask, it's like any major project. At what phase do you ask for the new funds for the next project? And that should sustain those positions, at least through the life of projects. Once we're done with projects, then you obviously don't need those positions anymore.
Correct.
For the water system administrative services manager, if this person, as Edie said, is to manage, kind of be that conduit for the Waihole system and the Wahiawa irrigation system when it comes over, then the revenues, which we should be because the ledge just gave 100% funding to pay off the Waihole, then you're going to take revenues from both of those systems to pay for the administration services manager. The program specialists, that should come from existing revenues because you have, if they're servicing, depends what they're servicing to. Are they servicing Oahu? Are they servicing Kauai? Are they going to service Big Island or all of it? Then revenues should be generated from those assets to pay for that. The admin assistant, what's the difference between this and the secretary?
So the admin assistant is really serving the senior executive assistant, the asset manager, and the project manager, because the senior secretary is working primarily with the board and as well as the ED. And, due to the number of...
Who's the senior secretary? You don't have that on your org chart.
Well, the senior level person would be, the spot that was recently vacated. We have one admin position currently. So we're proposing of adding an administrative assistant because of the volume of travel.
Until you finish, I don't think you'll get that until you fill the vacancy. They're gonna the legend say, why do you need a second position if you don't if you currently have a vacancy? And that's just saying that we would fund it 100% within our own special funds. They could still ask that question. Sorry, Chair Watts.
Yeah, Chair. Just a question. So, I guess before we get too deep in it, I guess I'm trying to understand what the restrictions are, because I don't know that even the 10 million infusion, I don't even know that you can use that for operations. I think that even that ceiling expansion, it's locked. You cannot touch that for. I mean, what staff do we have currently in ADC that are W funded?
Currently, all the water staff and the Kauai property manager and the water system manager.
So I think we gotta get with the ASO to figure out if it's got to be tied to something, like, you know what I mean, like the number 3, the water system administrative service manager, would have to be tied to, very specifically to the water, right?
You're correct, Chair. The $10 million is very specific, but and you're right. We couldn't use that for this. This is really the request for the following year, the 28th year, and so yes, if we did request this and the legislature did approve, they would provide a ceiling increase, but no appropriation. If it were revolving funds, right? If it were funded by revolving funds.
Because I think, like, if my math is correct, right? Like the revenue is like 2.9 million, but then the projected expenses is like 3.4. So I don't know. I mean, I get why we want to discuss this for planning purposes, but I don't know that this is even possible. I guess that's what I'm asking. right? Because if you were to plug all three in, you would have a shortfall of almost $500,000.
Correct. And you're absolutely right. This is more for planning purposes, that there might, and the quick filter, of course, is, if there's not enough funds, or if it's a possibility that you don't have enough funds, then you make decisions accordingly. You would cut based on the priority. So, I realized that if we got all these things, we would not be able to do all these things.
Yeah.
Right? We just wouldn't be able to do it. It's more just to get for the board to provide us, like, this is your priorities. We don't want, if you can do this, that's great. But these things, we don't want you to focus on these at all. Right. They're just.
But I guess, Mark, it would be helpful, like Deputy Director was suggesting, if we could get more solid numbers on the salaries and positions.
Sure.
That way we're not speculating on anything, right? We can just talk factually on these hard numbers.
Yeah.
But then with the Chair Hennessy, I don't know, I just I'm thinking out loud, but with the deficit projection, just based off of the current math, I mean, we may want to consider general funds. I don't know that the W funds could sustain this. And this also goes back to Wendy, when you folks had us, exempt all those Oahu leases to zero lease rent for up to 2 years, right? So that affects all of this stuff, right? So I guess it's hard to make decisions when we don't know what we're playing with. So I think we want to get more solid information on what our accounts look like. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Watson. That's a great point you bring up, and that's been part of the reason that staff needs to focus on the financials for this agency, so we can make these decisions. Okay, why don't we move on to the next category of priorities.
So the next category is personnel, training, and travel. And the number one priority is
Wendy, sorry, before jumping into this category, and it's okay to kind of take these out of order.
Okay.
So, it's broken up by category. So now, I know we just jumped in the first category, which is positions. So if that is what you feel, the first, the overall priority category is, okay, great. Now, looking at these next set of categories, which ones do we think should be the priority? Not to say that, personnel, training, and travel is not, especially the training, is not important, but, we need to get the absolute priorities, going first. So is this the next category of priority?
Yes, Chair, it actually is. If we are not taking care of our staff, we won't be able to deliver on the projects. And a big part of taking care of our existing staff is to build into them with some professional development and skill development so that they become more efficient and more effective at the job that they are currently in. So the number one priority really is the ADC staff training and travel. And that's a combination of, having the travel between the different islands to actually do their job, because we have more projects that we need to have eyes on what is currently being delivered and if it is meeting spec. For example, the project manager needs to see, and so does the construction manager needs to see, that the project for which they've been sent a bill is actually, the work has been completed, and not just take the word of the contractor that has been completed. But a big part of the training is figuring out if there are software systems or skill development that can make the jobs more effective and efficient, because we continue to do things the way that we've always done them without standing back and saying, is there a better process? Is there a software system? We're currently operating within the mindset of how we estimate jobs. But, outside of the public industry, most private industries use a software system called RS Means to actually do the execution of how much, when we're going to the ledge and asking for, $50 million for a project, that's our best estimate based on how we currently do things. But the way the world is working is they're using a software called RS Means to actually generate how much does it actually cost. And so the only way that the staff is going to recognize that is a software system that we could use that would help us take better estimates to the ledge is if they get additional training, and especially in the area of water systems management. And if there are different, satellite software systems that we could be using to be tracking the levels in the reservoirs, the inflow stream standards, so that we could have a live dashboard that generates the reports, that might actually be worth it. But without the additional training or even professional development in going to a conference, our staff really doesn't have the ability to look for more efficient or effective ways to do their jobs. So
on this note, as far as training, and these systems, sounds like this is a never-ending process of us going in circles. We've already had the audit, identify, deficiencies, jumping ahead, to like accounting systems. This stuff is just not getting addressed. So understand the need, and that is key, the skill development. We just talked about the need for a project specialist to work on contracts. So what I'm saying is we need to know specifically what kind of training, and that the training is actually going to hit the needs of our staff in order to do their jobs. And then, as far as this software and all that, we just got a goal. So what we need to know what these trainings and software is going to be, and then get this going.
We can provide some more detail. Do you want me to continue with the personnel training and travel, or do you want me to jump to a different category?
Let's see if any of our members have any comments about. Chair Wicker, Deputy Director Wicker, you guys got any
I got one.
Any feedback?
I got one, Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
What Chair Nezumi said is spot on. If just like the salaries, if we could get maybe a listing of the training that you're talking about. But I think in addition to that, we'd also want to know, kind of like a deliverable, right? Like I think we want to know what training is going to deliver to the employee to enable them to do whatever you're recommending. Just like travel. I think, going forward to spending $9,000 to travel, we got to start to, I think, tie deliverables to that. When they come back, what exactly is that travel value to ADC in what becomes executable for the agency, right? Because I think, the audit has already addressed what you're talking about. And there's already been systems like Yardi and all that, and we've had accountants, and we've had people in place, and we've lost people. So I think we need to understand, how this all ties into, the overall mission set for ADC, right? Like sending somebody to this class is going to equal X or something, or going to this class is going to deal with X to allow them to be more qualified to do, whatever it is.
We can do that, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Nezumi.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't want to go into any greater detail in the personnel. I thought we should move on to the consultants.
Okay, let's do
Unless
that.
there's questions by, the committee, I can answer that. So when we go on to the page 45, which is the consultants, these are in priority order. Number one being an attorney to manage the ADC's, NPDES. Number two is, in fact, the contract with an accounting consultant to continue some of the work that was recommended within the audit that has not been completed yet. And then number three is the IT support for our remote locations, such as the Halava location, Whitmore, and our Kauai. Those are not locations that are currently served by the IT department within the state office tower. And does anybody have any questions, or is there further justification that you'd like to see with these three?
How are you getting to those totals?
How did I get into the totals?
Mm-hmm.
So for the 1.5 million is based on the work that has been done so far. There have been, the cost of the permit in terms of filing a contested case. There's additional work that needs to be done in regards to the contested case. There was an additional lawsuit that was filed that was also addressed in that. And so it's based on the billable hours and the work that has been done. And that's where that number is coming from. But if you would like me to give even more detail, I can certainly do that.
I think the board will need, not here, but eventually detail
Mhm.
on exactly what we're asking for and how it got that to that amount.
Mhm.
Or I see Chair Watts up, his hands up.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Deputy Director, Chair Hinazumi. Wendy, but then just to clarify, these funds would not be available to after July 1, 2027.
Mm-hmm.
Part of these bills are due now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how are we? I mean, is there some agreement that we're not going to pay the bill for up to over a year?
There is no agreement, but there has been conversations that were initiated. If we dial it back to what was in the budget request from ADC, in fiscal year 27, ADC did request $750,000 for legal fees, and then additional funds for potential fines and compliance. And those requests were also carried forward by DBED, but they were line itemed out in the governor's budget. And then staff asked what would be the next steps, because at that point we did not have the funds to cover the legal bills. And, we asked, is that, through initiating a bill? Is it through an emergency appropriation? And
well, no, I'm not asking about that, because if we're going to go there, then I would also argue that you guys were never supposed to get this high in the first place.
Right.
What I'm asking though is there some agreement with the lawyers or the law firm that they're willing to defer billing us to allow us one whole year to encumber this appropriation and pay the bill then? Because you're not going to have this money until July 1 of next year.
No, there is not an agreement with the attorney to sit on bills for a whole year. This is a projection based on ongoing work in and around the permit. And we can give additional detail. In regards to the number two, with a contract with an accounting consultant.
Hold on, can I add to the first one? So go back to what Board Member Watts said. The board authorized a specific amount. So somehow you had calculated a total based on potential work at that time. Then without the approval, you went 10 times over. So it basically binds. I mean, how do we know that this is the stop? Because then there has to be a cap, and that's something I said even before at a board meeting with the concerns of the cost.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think two things would have to happen, right? I mean, I guess, I mean, is someone, I mean, we have a demand for payment now. So how do we pay the bill now? We can't, correct?
We do not have the funds currently
Okay,
to pay the
so
bill.
I guess what I'm asking is you guys might want to start talking to the law firm. I guess we gotta set expectations here, right? Because we can't pay it, right? I mean, we don't have the money to pay it today. If they wanted payment today, we couldn't do it.
That's correct.
So I think what we're asking is, I'm glad you guys are budgeting for next year, but if he wants his money today, this is you know what I mean. It's just he wouldn't be able to do this until 1 year from now. So we need to set expectations, I think, there. And then I think, like, back to these two other items, the contract with the consultant and the ADC remote locations. It's hard because you guys are listing it as W funds again, but we don't know what's in there. And based on the previous slides, we would already be at a deficit. So like and then when I was reading through the budget, I think the 10 million mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 10 million cap, there's a proviso in there too, right? That the increase can only be used for ag land acquisition.
That is correct.
Correct.
So I guess what you guys are listing in here is not even possible for some of the stuff, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're correct. I believe that is that particular ceiling increase is specifically for the acquisition of land. And although it doesn't state it plainly, it's clear that there's also an appropriation that fits that. So I think you're exactly
right. It's not weird, but the way that they bumped up the ceiling, but they kind of locked it in there, and there's some language about for land acquisition.
Land acquisition.
Check that.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, why don't we move on to the next category?
So the next category is consultants. And this is, improvements on current property or projects. This is not for new projects. And the very first item that we have listed is to do base yard improvements. And that is to repair a shed that fell over on one of our workers. And we are expecting tentatively that the Waihole bond may be paid off. And so there would be some operating funds that could be used rather than asking the ledge for funds. But again, the purpose we were hoping to accomplish today is for the staff to give recommendations to the committee members and to get feedback of, we agree, we disagree, we'd like to see this out of order, you've missed some things, so that once we understand our priorities are correct, then we can come back and say, okay, these are the things that we think could be funded through our revolving funds. And these are things that we definitely have a gap and are going to need to ask for ledge support or come up with another suggestion on how to fund. But if the priorities are incorrect, then any of the assumptions that we're making in terms of budgeting was wasted energy. So I'm acknowledging that the number one priority is the base yard improvements. It's about the safety of our existing staff. And in looking and doing some more internal discussion, the number two priority is not the Mililani Ag Tech. The staff would like to put the number two priority as the Waihole Valley Lot 48 and 49 assessment, remediation, and renovation. So lots 48 and 49 are currently within the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation. They currently do not have any tenants on them, and they would provide a base yard on the windward side for us to be storing equipment. And in the case of one of the lots, it actually has two houses that are not occupied that could potentially be used for ag worker housing. So the $120,000 that we are recommending for the second year, fiscal year 29, is basically to do the assessment, to figure out how much can we just fix up the houses that are currently there. How much would it cost to fence in the yard? Is there any remediation that needs to be done in order to activate the 2 lots? And ADC was approached by HHFDC to find out if we would be interested in the 2 lots. These are access points that we use in navigating back into the system on the windward side. So our number 1 priority would be the base yard. Number 2 would be for the lot 48 and 49, with the potential that maybe we would be able to pay those through our revolving funds if the bond in fact is paid off. And then our number 3 priority would be the Mililani Ag Tech Park. And there is substantial work that needs to be done in terms of the title and the legal and the planning in which those lands can be used for. So we are proposing $100,000 in fiscal year 28 and $50,000 in fiscal year 29. And those are our top 3. But if you look through the list, the committee can certainly ask, why would you not put decommissioning the Manaw Reservoir or EA? If the committee has a different priority, we would certainly like to know what that is.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. And this is the first time we're having this discussion in front of this committee. So in order to help the committee make decisions, there's a lot of information that is needed. So that's the process we're going through right now, because it's the first time we're having this discussion. So, members will ask these questions. You will do your best to answer now. If not, we'll just have some follow-up information to be provided to us for the next one. And then from there, we can help make an informed decision on what we think the priority should be. And it's great to hear, that, staff is focused on, coming up with these priorities first. And then to the extent we can support it, we want to support it. So, okay. Any discussion from our members on these 3 that Wendy went over?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, if not, let's go to the next category.
So the next category is, again, supporting internal or current assets and projects. It is not for future. So in priority order, the number 1 is security services. And this would basically be contracting with the Department of Law Enforcement, because we do have 24-hour security over the Bot well, which is a diesel-powered well that needs to have that level of security because of the number of acres that it is providing water to, and there is no plan B for that. And so this has been ongoing in terms of watching the well, but it also has included roving security because of the amount of theft that we've had. And we're proposing that this would continue at like the 2.5 million. The added security would also be including technology surveillance in regards to assets around the reservoir and the spillway, as well as the food hub. We are going to need to have additional security available to manage these sites. And in the case where we will have events at, the central Oahu area, for example, where Farm Fair is, there's an added need for security during the events and just watching over equipment that might be staged there. So that's our number 1 priority. Our number 2 priority is purchasing equipment for the Waihole water system. And that, again, could be something that could potentially be paid for out of revolving funds down the road. But in the case of the most recent Kona storms, we were incredibly, incredibly fortunate in that we did have a blockage in the ditch. We were given 2 hours in which to remove the blockage, and we were able to get a hold of a equipment company during the midst of the storms and have them trailer out within an hour the equipment that we needed to remove the blockage. because the Waihole does not have an excavator. They don't have a bobcat. They don't have, any kind of brush cleaning equipment. So in some cases it's rented, but oftentimes when you need to get equipment, it's when everybody else is needing to have equipment. And so the number 2 priority is the equipment like that to keep the system moving and the system water flowing. The number 3 is the SCADA system. There's some repairs that need to be again replaced or fixed. And that's something that we are using in terms of monitoring the level in the ditch so that we can report that in. And then the 4th is the water system monitoring and metering. And so that's, basically so that we can fulfill our legal responsibilities in regards to reported usage and levels within the reservoir and the ditch. But again, it's based on staff's suggested priorities, and any and all feedback is most welcome.
And I know in terms of security, have we, do we know what our loss might be? I guess how much theft or damage may be going on, and do we know what that number is?
I'm going to ask for Ken to weigh in because he has substantially more institutional knowledge on what some of the theft has been in the past. Ken, would you like to provide some insight?
Yeah, we do have incidents reports, but I'll be real honest, a lot of it goes unreported. A lot of these thefts go unreported. But we do have our roving security as well as our 24/7 guards. If there is an incident that they're aware of, they do file an incident report. So we could provide some kind of background on that. But as far as the actual dollar amount, I don't. I mean, I can put an estimate, but that wouldn't be an actual.
Okay, so we do have some form of security right now, or some amount of security being provided. And so this would be to continue the same services or increase the amount of services.
So there's an increase in the amount of area that's covered and a change in how the services are delivered because we're asking to use more technology and less people, and using some of the drone equipment. And so trying to be more efficient at what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Chair Watts.
Thank you, Chair Hinazumi. Kind of similar questions. Just kind of looking at the budget. So like that, for the next 2 years, it's 5 million in security. I guess for me, even for like where I work at, when we spend that kind of money, we should probably look at some kind of security master plan. That really kind of addresses the security needs for ADC as a whole. And then Ken, we can help, but I don't know if it's possible. I know you said there's a lot of unreported stuff, but for the most part, we should try to capture what we can on for reporting. Be good to kind of know where the breach points are, or if certain farms always get hit, or if fencing would help or cameras would help, that kind of stuff too. And then I don't know if we are adjacent to any other government facilities, but it could help to look and maybe looking if the other facilities have security contracts or sheriff contracts or whatever, or dual care or whoever's out there. But I think this is some serious money, so I think if we can come up with some kind of master plan for security. I think even when looking at the acquisitions for even Wailua, right? I mean, we have some health and safety things we got to protect so people don't die sneaking into those areas or whatever. So, it could be helpful to do that. And then secondly, Chair, I would agree with the staff on the item number 2. I think in having equipment that's owned and operated by ADC is critical. Mark God bless Mark, on the day of the storm, the last time he was out there trying to rent equipment, and I think that's kind of, it's a scary place to be in when water's flowing and all that. So, only thing I would add, Wendy, in that area is repair and maintenance. Just account for that as well. If the thing breaks down, how you're going to fix it, etc. But thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Director Wicker?
Thank you. Do we have any security agreements with KAA under the MOU or MOA with them?
In the case of KAA, they are actually covering the security through the common area maintenance fees that they're charging. So they do have some roving security. They have cameras, and they have a locked gate system.
So how is this appropriation split between Kauai and Oahu then?
This is 100% Oahu. This is not including Kauai.
Okay, so the justification needs to be revised then, because it says Oahu and Kauai.
Well, we were thinking that, okay, we will revise that.
It says the funds will be used to hire security guards to patrol ADC property in Central Oahu and Kauai. Okay, so for Oahu, have we had any further discussion with Department of Law Enforcement and what kind of capacity they can bring in? Because they did receive additional enforcement. I'm not sure the status on where they're at. We are, looking at it's planned in the site plan to have their office in Whitmore, which should help with presence and provide officers. So was that, I don't know what that timeline of that phase looks like.
As far as the timeline for the DLE, for Whitmore.
Well, just in general, because then we can say of this. I mean, if it's all for Oahu, and you're looking, I mean, you're the way it's set up is you're asking for recurring, but at some point there may be a scale down due to DLE's efforts.
And Deputy, part of this number was because of some discussions with DLE, and they had provided some budgetary figures. So, and that included Wahiawa irrigation system. So we had talked with them on the critical hours of, obviously during the day when everybody's busy, you don't really need as much patrol, but there are some times when you have to kind of step it up. So I think we're really had some discussions with them, and that has sort of been paused a little bit, and I think we'll have to revisit that. But these numbers are kind of partly.
I think it will help in justifying the A fund request to say, look, we are looking at other ways to bring on security. So here's where we're currently at. It is unknown with DLE, and really having those discussions, then they can say, like, this is the only, we've looked at other options. This is the option we have, is we need to ask for new funds. Well, you got to, and also point to why the acreage on Oahu and what that's generating in lease revenues is insufficient to pay for security.
Yes. And it's a good discussion to have with DLE, because at some point you're correct. I don't believe this is going to be ongoing forever. It becomes a certain point when DLE is up and running, and they have the staff. Then really, I think we would rely on them to handle a lot of this.
As for the licensed lands, I know we approved a new market rate for moving forward. Was there ever a CAM discussed? So similarly to Kauai, where there's a CAM, is there a CAM on top of the annual lease per acre so that we can use hopefully some of those funds to pay for security? Or is that, has a study been done that says that doesn't pencil out for farmers where they pay the market rate, which it's $1,800 an acre a year though. So I'm sure somehow a CAM could be considered to help pay for such services if it provides security to prevent theft, crop theft, etc.
I do believe a CAM.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say that when we did the appraisal to find out what market rate was for licensing on Oahu, a part of that study also included an assessment of common area maintenance charges on Oahu. So we do have those numbers, and it will be a period of conversation with the individual tenants, because that's not something that was part of prior licenses, but it is certainly part of the current and new licenses moving forward.
So it'll be the newly approved market rate per acre plus the common area maintenance moving forward.
Correct. But it's part of some policy discussions that we need to have with the board, which is, how can we amend past licenses, because they should not be benefiting from something that they don't pay for.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair,
real fast, I just want to add, Deputy Director, the DLE is 3 to 5 years out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry, Jason.
Oh, no, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add to what Deputy Director was saying. And I think, I think, Mark, while it's good to, this whole spreadsheet is, is geared the way the ledger likes it. I think for the board, at least until we get more familiar with some of this stuff, like when you guys have like 2.5 million, maybe we can, in a justification, list out more detail on what that is, because I think Deputy Director was asking, whether it was Oahu and Kauai, and then Wendy said it was just Oahu, but then when you jumped in, you said WIS too. So if we could just get an idea of what that 2 million, 2.5 looks like and where it's going would be helpful.
I agree. And even so much till adding the MOF, the funding was probably, this wasn't the time to put it in. I think it was more to create the priorities that the board would like to see. And then we back it into, can we afford it or not? And then what if it's a very high priority, but we can't afford it? Then it becomes an ask, right? A legislative request.
Yeah.
So I think, I probably shouldn't have included that in hindsight. I'm thinking about it. So we should provide more breakdown and detail, but it becomes more of the board determines the priorities, and then can we afford it or not? And
but you know what though, it does help though, because it does force you to now make sure there's enough money in the revolving fund to even consider that, right? So it does work too though. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just want to one last thing to add is the questions, when I look at these line items, and if the committee and then the board approves, then it's considered for DBED's budget, and it's in DBED's budget, and should it make it in the Gov's budget? These are the questions we're going to be asked during committee: is did you explore all these? Also, what has been asked is, we do need to understand what the revenues over expenditures are for broken down for each county, because that will come up. It has been asked during the site visits by the Ways and Means Committee, and it's a very simple question that will show clearly, here's how much revenues we do bring in. Here's our operating costs and out years to get and secure these additional lands, which is part of the mission to keep acquiring these assets, but we also got to secure them. We won't be able, the revenues don't make it. And you can't, and for agriculture, farming, ranching, market rates are different types of use. And you cannot just keep increasing it to the point where you don't get any tenants to cover the cost of a security contract. So I think there is a true cost that the state has to consider helping to subsidize with, but we don't know what we're working with clearly. I mean, we're looking at all these line items, but yet I think what would have been helpful to start out was with the revenue over expenditures picture. Like, what does that 5-year financial plan look like? And then bake these into that. That's what BNF does with the state financial plan.
I agree with you. I that's why even with the W funds, I hesitate because without knowing what that looks like, it's scary to touch.
That's true, because then you're basically putting the board in a situation to say, oh, the board approved it, but you didn't have the funds, and that wasn't clearly articulated.
I just have one more question, and I might be jumping ahead, but I going through the remainder of the charts. I don't see any budget appropriation requests for the pumps, PMRF pumps.
That actually is something we're going to do in 27.
Okay.
So this coming fiscal year, we just have to do it. So we kind of threw it in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we move on to the next category?
So the next category is what we're calling other operating costs. And if the board, if the committee has different ways they'd like to see this broken out that makes more sense to the committee and explaining to Ledge, we are more than open to that. The number one priority is compliance with the NPDES permit as it stands right now. And, one of the things that is coming up, I think it's August 12th, is a deadline that the hearings officer had given to Department of Health to revisit, all of the information that ADC had provided in consideration for how the permit is written. And, there is the off chance that maybe some of the monitoring and sampling could be downshifted, but we cannot make that assumption. So we're moving with the assumption that the current level of compliance is what we're going to be dealing with moving forward. And so the 650,000 is in fact an estimate based off of the numbers that we've gotten from the service providers. The number two priority, and we've kind of moved things around again, is actually the property management software consulting, and it's listed as number 5 right now. And what that $650,000 represents is the cost of the license for Yardi was a 5-year license that was purchased, and that license expires on June 30th, 2027. So in order to continue with Yardi moving forward, we are going to need to budget $650,000 to re-up for another 5-year period for the Yardi system. So we're putting that as a number 2 because that's definitely a big part of the audit compliance. And then we listed as number 3 the ag event sponsorships. And, specifically we're looking at working with people like the Farm Bureau in terms of the Hawaii State Farm Fair, and being able to provide a level of financial sponsorship and, other ag events that the board would deem as a priority. We have at this point not ever sponsored or been a sponsor for any of the ag events in the state. Number 4 is really something that could potentially be paid for out of our revolving funds, depending on the cash flows, but we did put that in as something that needed to be added. And we're basically replacing vehicles that are 10 years old. So we have not had a plan in the past where, we buy a piece of equipment, we buy a new truck every 3 years. We're basically trying to play a little bit of catch up with some equipment that is past its considered life. So it would be replacing in fiscal year 28 a vehicle for Waihole, and then purchasing a vehicle for the Wahiawa system manager. And then fiscal year 29 would be replacing an existing truck in the Waihole system. So number 1 is the NPDES compliance. Number 2 is the property management. 3 is event sponsorships. 4 is the vehicles listed as priority 3. And then 5 is the vehicle for the main office, because we typically have the asset manager or Mark or Ken that needs to go out and visit the property, and staff is using personal vehicles, which cannot always transverse the terrain that it needs to transverse. So that would be our top priorities. Are there any suggestions from the committee or questions?
Well, I got one as far as the Yardi.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had Yardi for 4. You just said the license is going to expire next year.
Correct.
We've had it for 4 years then so far. Have we gotten anything? Because I thought that was something that keeps coming up, that Yardi is not like up and running, so we haven't been getting these reports. What's been going on with Yardi?
We actually went live with Yardi in November, And
Okay.
in December started issuing invoices from the Yardi system a month in advance. So the December bills that were issued were for January. So we've been using the Yardi system in which to issue the bills on a regular monthly basis. And considerable amount of staff time and work went into reconciling all of the licenses and inputting all of the information into the Yardi system. And one of the beneficial parts is once you enter, the license information, all the step ups automatically happen in the billing. So there's never a chance that you're going to miss a step up, which, could be at year 5, you get an additional 2.5%. It's automatically calculated into the bills that were sent out. I do think originally the intent was to be able to use Yardi not only for the property, but also for the water systems. And that has not been a good fit to point, but there's some modifications coming in the future that would potentially allow for that. The way the Yardi system currently works is it loves standard billing. So once you update the licenses, it likes to just continue on. The problem with water is it's variable. So when it rains, nobody uses water. So it's not like, okay, well, I'm making my mortgage payment of $1,000 a month. 1 month it may be 0 because nobody takes water. The next month it could be 3,000 because it was a drought. So all of that variable information in the current system has to be manually inputted. So it makes it.
Thanks. So we're using this as a billing system. So took us 3 years to get to this point. It's being used as a billing system. So you heard the overarching questions or comments as far as us needing to know our financial position. So, in terms of leases, we need to get these reports to see where we're at with these leases. Deputy Director just mentioned, we also want it to be broken out by county. So, it's if this is the property management system we want to go with, it's important to, relicense this. But we got to be making sure we're using this and presenting the information, whether it's to our board members or to, the, legislators that have questions about this. So we need to see, there, Chair Watts, talked about, the importance of deliverables for these things as well. So we need to make sure that when we prioritize these things and we get this license in this case, that we are taking full advantage of it. Okay. Any other members had any questions on these items or comments?
I just had one question, Chair.
Good.
Wendy, on or maybe two, NPDES compliance. So the 650, is that that's just the monitoring for monitoring?
So what that covers is pulling samples to be compliant, sending the samples off to the lab on the mainland, getting the reports, and then the staff is currently providing monthly reports to the Hawaii Department of Health as well as the EPA.
And I guess so this dollar amount is what's expected from our permit. Could that change, or we're pretty much locked in at this number, or?
Well, it could change, if the compliance terms changed. It could change if we are operating the PMRF pumps. And so that, there are certain parameters that are required monthly, but when you start more regularly discharging, there's additional monitoring. And so, that additional cost is not reflected in this number, but could potentially be included in the cost, estimate that's given to the Navy in regards to operating the pumps.
But I imagine that if any kind of cost is incurred because of the pump operation, we could probably bill that to the Navy, correct?
We would hope, yes.
So we make sure we talk about that because
You are correct. It could be significant.
well, I just want to make sure we have enough, because the fines are expensive and it's a lot of money. So and then the last question on this is the vehicle for ADC.
Mhm.
How many vehicles do we have?
You're operating. And do you mean this on Oahu?
Mhm. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess Oahu and Kauai. Yeah.
Could I provide a more detail afterwards? Because I think that will be telling to not just tell you the number, but the age of the vehicles
Okay.
and what's operating and what's not operating.
And who's
Because
using
the
it?
$70,000 number is for one vehicle, for one new
Yeah.
vehicle. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair. Oh, sorry. One more question. On the bottom, number 6. Update to ADC strategic plan. This would be for. We're not required to update it for 5 years, but this would be to. What would this dollar amount be for?
So the 175,000 is for any additional changes that the board might want to do with the plan prior to the next delivery date is July 1st of 2028. And that's when the new strategic plan is due to be updated. But with the strategic plan that's currently being worked on, that helps us to do the update prior to then, but there may be additional changes, information, stakeholder meetings, that need to be accomplished per the board's direction.
Okay, so I would, Chair, if you would indulge me, a couple of things, Deputy Director Ricker, too. I was thinking, and along the lines of the strategic plan, because one of the things that we did work with UHCDC to address on the plan was being more clear on deliverables and how to create measurement, right? Because the auditors, they like to see how you judging success, right? So creating benchmarks or creating things that can be evaluated to show that you're moving forward. But I think one of the things that we had a hard time doing, and then of course we talked about it. This is the first time we're going through a budget like this. I think one of the things we need to put into the budget is ADC needs to go through a financial audit. So I think we should be budgeting for a fiscal audit as well in the FY28 budget request. And I think we would want to, or we can, and the board can help with this, but to be very clear with the Ways and Means and Finance members and staff that, because of the nature of ADC, public-private, a public corporation of sorts that operates in real time these land leases, we would want probably an external financial auditor, like a Deloitte or somebody to do that for us. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, would you like to move on to the CIP request? Or are there additional questions in this category?
No, let's move on.
So in the CIP request, the number 1 priority is to basically line Reservoir 155. And this is a complicated 20-year project that I don't want to go into in detail today, but I can provide additional information and background to the admin committee. But the 6.5 million is a funding gap between what money is been setting in an account for the last 10 years and hasn't been used by the Army Corps in actually instituting the lining. So there is a gap. So that's the funds for the 6.5 and then the additional for the 5 million. And this was a project that was identified as a potential fine if the reservoir was not in fact lined. There's a lot more history I'd like to provide at another point, but that's number one. Number two is Wahiawa irrigation system repairs. And the numbers of the 8 million and the 11 million, and I think there's a typo because it says fiscal year 23 and that's 28, are pulled directly out of the E2 report. And they are the recommendations for significant immediate repairs and we are using those numbers from E2 to generate the fiscal year 28 and fiscal year 29. And so there are very specific items that the E2 report is calling out that need to be addressed. And so that's the genesis of those numbers. Number three is ECAS repairs. And these repairs and the repair figures are coming out of, at the time, it was the Hawaii Department of Ag study with the recommendations in that study and the numbers from that study. And then our number four, and I would say that is kind of our cutoff in terms of our top, is monitoring equipment for all the reservoirs. And for fiscal year 28, it would be 3 of the systems for Wahiawa irrigation and 2 of these for East Kauai. And then in fiscal year 29, potentially adding an additional 2, and those would be for the Grove reservoirs. During the Kona storms, we had a 48-hour period where we needed to have ADC staff and the National Guard calling in hourly levels within the reservoir, and we had to have people on site to do that. And this is monitoring equipment that would do that electronically and then would provide it in live time and would also help in the ADC board's direction of being a lot more transparent. So we would be able to be very transparent about the water levels in our reservoirs. The last item, the number 7, I just wanted to call your attention to. This is significantly deferred maintenance on gates, and they are gates that are accessed in some cases, by the public, and it is unsafe. And so the public is navigating into sections of Waihole. In some cases, they will periodically dump things into the Waihole. In other cases, they may put in, basically plywood in order to swim in the Waihole. So by maintaining the gates, we certainly can assist with the public safety factor. Again, that could be funding that could be used from revolving funds if in fact the debt is paid off, and so the revenue could be used for that.
Okay, thanks. And just one general note, we got this currently labeled as deferred maintenance. But what we need to do is have a maintenance schedule developed where we can, address maintenance on a regular basis. Ideally, we're not going to run into these situations where we've been deferring these things like number 1 for 20 years. Now, granted, there's, a lot of circumstances around it, but, we don't want this to then, snowball into some giant concern. So that's, part of a lot of discussion is, the 5-year outlook on financials, and same with the maintenance schedule, routinely taking care of these things so they don't become a catastrophic failure at some point. Any members have any comments or input on any of these projects?
I just want to reiterate what you said, Chair. The catastrophic failure, spot on. And I think Mark and Wendy, I think there's never really you never really stop doing this on this kind of stuff, right? I mean, you're constantly evaluating this kind of stuff. So, I think we want to be very clear. I think between myself and Chair Hinazumi, as we work for land companies, so we kind of understand this stuff. But I think when we talk to the larger board too, we want to be very clear on a lot of this stuff because these are things that can result in loss of life and they're very serious and they might not, there might be a lot of, well, why we got to do this, why we got to do that, but these things can deteriorate and become a problem and become catastrophic very quickly. So just to keep that on the front burner. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
There are some additional items on the second page, on page 52 that are also part of the, CIP for existing projects. So if there's any questions, I think one of the questions that may come up is priority 9 is installing a guardrail on Ma'alo Road. And that is a road that is owned by ADC. It is not part of the highway system. However, it is used as a plan B should something happen to the existing routes, in and around Lihue, then this is the backup. But, there's a reason that we put that into our budget and that it is not something that is covered by another department within the state.
Okay, thank you. Okay, why don't we move on to, I think it's going to be our last category. Or, no, sorry.
No, it isn't.
A couple more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next to last.
Well.
So the number one most important part of this is really the priority one, and that is to get an electrical connection to power the Boutwell pump, because the Boutwell pump is currently running on diesel. The cost of diesel is about $40,000 a month right now. And so it's significant. We're putting it in as, a CIP request, but it could potentially, once we keep running the numbers based on the board's priorities, it might be something we would be able to fund out of revolving funds, but there's most likely going to be some design work in terms of, how to run the electrical power from the existing power lines into the Boutwell area to operate that pump. And then it's not listed, but obviously number 2 is to make a significant repair on Kauai in regards to ECUS. And this is a group of small disadvantaged farmers. And it's basically, it's a one-time major vegetation removal, which is causing some collapses in the ditch.
Okay. Any comments from our members? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next category then.
Okay. For the next category, we really struggled with, setting up priorities on this one. But the number one priority that we would like to change is to have the installation of the wildfire monitoring and detection system in Kekaha and Kalepa, and that is an electronic system for notifying public in case of a wildfire. And so, to your point, Chair Watts, taking seriously the potential of loss of life, that is really the factor that brought that to the top. And, we've kind of struggled with the, EPMF, and they are more on the second page on 55, with the second priority being Central Oahu. There's design funds currently in for the EPMF for Oahu for fiscal year 27. And, putting in a CIP request for fiscal year 28 would give us 3 years to basically build out that concept. But the need is so great on Maui. And so priority 8 would become priority 3, with fiscal year 28 being a potential land acquisition, which is yet to be identified. And then fiscal year 29 being some design money for designing a facility on Maui. And then the number 1 would become number 4. And that's basically to put a pipeline in for a section of a reservoir in the East Kauai system. But we could really, use some direction from the board on the priorities in this category.
Got it. Thank you. Any comments from our members?
Just one. I keep saying one, but it's more than one. um, regarding this number 5, this Kalepa, this is our office on Kauai.
We don't have an office. I mean, in central Kauai, we have an office out in Keikaha, but around Kalepa, which is 5,000 acres and a potential acquisition of 1,000 acres, we do not currently have any office area in that space.
Okay, so this is a request to build some kind of structure for staff?
Yep, some storage space in the office space, like a trailer.
Also to the I'm not asking you to put it on. I'm just saying to keep it on your radar. But one of the things that we've all talked about in the past is even on Oahu, right? Even though you guys do have an office, it is really inadequate for what you folks do, right? The space, even having to meet with external partners and business people, and when you're conducting land transactions, we don't have conference rooms. We don't have, so just keep that in mind. I think, as you build out the EPMFs, and maybe there's alternate sites that can be used or what, but really the current ADC site is not conducive to positive work. So I would just tell you to keep that on your front burner. And then I would also like to suggest, and Chair, I don't know and Deputy Director, I don't know what the exact timeline is or deadlines are, but for the EPMF on Maui or FPIN, I appreciate that it's on here, and I'd like to see it go forward. I really believe on Maui there's people that are just waiting for this thing to go, and they could definitely use it. But if it helps, I'd like to see if ADC could use some of its powers, like bonds, to see if we're not successful or we get any kind of pushback from the legislature or whatever, to use our powers to try to bond finance this and really create something that the users can pay for the state. So just put it out there.
We do have, I think, like with revenue bond subsidiaries, and we should explore those. I agree.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we don't have any further comments, then Wendy and team, thank you for putting this together. You've heard quite a bit of comments, got some kind of overarching themes, I would say, as far as how they should be looked at. If you guys can, reprioritize, within the category, and then also amongst all categories, work on coming up with that priority. We talked about a lot of good things, focusing on, helping staff and the agency be able to, perform just starting from our most basic operations, to completing all these projects that we have. It's a daunting task, and staff is applauded for all the effort over these years and continuing to take care of it. So if we can, based on comments today, if we can kind of reorganize this list, we can have further discussion at our next administration committee meeting. And members, I do for myself, this was the focus, the budget items, and I do understand it's slightly out of order, not exactly knowing our financial picture. So if we can just spend a little bit of time right now, going over where we're at in, fiscal year 26, we definitely need to get a better handle so we can see how well we are doing operationally. What we can fund. We've got some ideas for how to add things like either increase our license, lease rates, or add a CAM to help pay for these items. But ultimately, we need to know, how we are doing on an annual basis, in order to make these decisions as far as what we can fund and what we need to go request for.
Did you want to go to 26 or 27?
26. Just do a you can just kind of give us a recap of where we're at now.
It's going to be a very significantly different funding picture in 27. But yeah, so in any case, yeah, we can definitely do this.
Yeah, so essentially for, each period, each year, we'll need, just the most basic, profit and loss statement, right?
Mhm.
So we know, okay, well, this is how well we did, this period.
Okay.
Or if we didn't do, too well,
Yeah. So
at least we know what our shortfall is.
yeah, okay. Wendy, you want me to just, or you want to go through this? This is the actuals. Yeah, this is 26 actuals that we had, and Carol helped us put this together. So I'm confident that they're very accurate.
I'll go ahead and give
Okay.
a start, Mark, and feel free to jump in. I think at the very top, it's basically our ledge appropriation that is being funded, but we did try to break things out for revenue that was generated, on Kauai versus, revenue that was generated on Oahu. So we're trying to do that. And I don't know if this is making sense to the admin committee and how we are generating, the numbers. And it's a little convoluted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The first table is really, this is revenue, right? And there we have, ADC has 3 funds, basically. This is 6161, which is a legislative appropriation. This one here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, I hope so. 312, which is the ADC portion, and then 325, which is Waihole water system. So in essence, that's what you see here. So in hindsight, I probably could have organized this a little differently, but so this is an appropriation, and then every appropriation has a budget restriction that they just basically that they hold back. Hold back might not be the right word, but it's basically that you're not allowed to spend. That's sort of because this is an appropriation is based on general funds, and that's tax revenue, right? And tax revenue goes up and down, so sometimes it's higher or lower. The 312 is revenue from our revolving fund, so this is rents. So we delivery charge for water. This is what what happens, and you can see that there's some fluctuation that it doesn't. So the what we probably want to do in the future is we probably want to adjust the budgeted number, instead of it being sort of a divide by 4 sort of way of doing it, make it reflect seasonal use potential. So lots of times you'll see greater amount of use in certain quarters, like July, where you're going to have drier conditions. So, water, usage goes up. And then you have wetter seasons where water usage kind of goes down. and then there's rental income. We're trying to work on identifying these. This is how it's broken down as it comes out in reports to us. But we know that Department of Accounting General Service is working at a more precision on providing, depends on the coding, these things. So rental income, this is our actuals, and these are the budgeted numbers. So you can see the actuals for the ADC account.
Mark, if I could just jump in for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
The actuals are recording when we are receiving payment, just to be clear. It's not when we are actually issuing, so that sometimes is a little wonky. It's not based on when we issued out the invoice. It's actually when we receive payment. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because ADC is sort of I think the accountant consultant that we worked with said that we are sort of a hybrid of accrual and cash. So it's not, we don't base our revenue based on invoicing alone. It's based on, there's a little bit of accrual because we do know that we're expecting certain amount of revenue, but it's sort of a cash/accrual. So he said it's a hybrid. And this is the Waiahole water. So you can see it really follows that sort of that seasonal, right? It's much higher in the first quarter when it's drier, than as it gets closer to the winter months, it sort of drops down a little bit. And then the next section is really the expenses, the expenditures. And again, similarly, this is the general funded account. And again, actuals and budget. So, a lot of the category other current expenditures is, it becomes sort of the catch-all for a lot of the, these things like office supplies and, travel and that kind of thing. As part of this exercise, we're realizing that what we would like to do, and this is something that I've talked to Deep Ed Fiscal, is how do we try to adjust these budgeted figures that we receive through BNF, or DAGs, I should say, to possibly reflect, more of the actual spending. Because usually it comes in these sort of these buckets, right? This is the greater breakdown. And then this is the Waiahole expenditures. So we didn't spend a lot. I think we're going to see a big jump in the third and fourth quarter, especially because of the Kona loads. We put in there was a lot of overtime and a lot of additional costs that we haven't captured yet.
Okay, and then Mark, you can maybe just kind of scroll ahead to your next pages where you're showing the revenue less expenditures.
Okay.
You can kind of focus and thanks. You've got this broken up, right, as far as general funds and basically operations, Waiahole system.
Okay.
So if you can, I know this is just a quick, very quick look, and you guys, doing the best you can as far as putting this financial picture together for us, with the restraints you have within the system right now. So, but if we can just kind of, touch on that, that's ultimately, what we're gonna, want to be looking at, making sure we got all the numbers right, of course, eventually. And then, we got an idea of how we're doing, year to year.
Okay. Yeah.
I know it's per quarter, so you can just kind of use one quarter as an example.
Okay. So let's say in the second quarter for the general funded accounts, you know, where our actual is, where this line here is revenue less expenditures. So we're at, you know, we're a little bit ahead in that area, right? In the first couple of quarters. 325, which is the ADC account. You know, we're currently still showing, and this is, of course, you know, we're still showing that we're slightly ahead, but less so in the second quarter. And then in the Waiholea system, you know, we're also, you know, we're slightly ahead in the first couple of quarters. Yeah, okay. And then the grand total, you know, is we're actually, when we add all the different groups together, this is another account that we don't really receive. This is going to be the FPIN account that is being created. And so it's basically all salary and costs there. So this is the, you know, the sort of the total for the FPIN account. And actually, I think, so, you know, the 27 budget really kind of shows a comparison. And that's what we were trying to, you know, so this upcoming fiscal year, what I think we're reflecting some of the costs that are not hitting this year. We had a table, page.
Chair Hinazumi, I did want to point out a couple of things that were highlighted on page 7 of the submittal, and our revenues are down by 11%. And the reason that the revenue is down by 11% is we did have commercial tenants in Whitmore that we needed to evict in order to put in the infrastructure that's going in to build out the Ag Hub. So that represented a loss of revenue. And then on Kauai, we had one of our larger tenants lose a significant contract and came to the board and it requested some rent forgiveness and moving from tillable land license fees to non-tillable due to the loss of that contract. So those are the two reasons for a somewhat significant drop in our income. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. So, and we haven't, you know, the breakdown that we're talking about, so this is for 27, okay? And I think, so this gives us the kind of a picture of, and it's going to be similar for this year, right? So, you know, there's an appropriation, you know, that we may get, but we're not sure, right? I mean, it's still in the hands of the governor and legislature. And you know, so with respect to, and this is for the 161, so this is not the account that receives rents. Okay, so the revolving fund is an account that is able to receive income. So you're going to see it reflected here, not having anything. This is our expenses based on past years. So we are just an estimate of what the expenses have been like in the past. And so obviously there's a negative here, about $78,000 in the 27 years, so about $80,000 less. This is the revenue generating account for ADC. So this is again based on what our estimated revenue for like rents, things like that. And we try to break it down to Kauai, Oahu, and we're not, it's not spot on because we're going to try to figure out how you know, some of these like personal services and other general expenses, how that gets broken down per county, or eventually, per sort of project area, how much, because we don't do a timekeeper sort of system like that for all the employees on how much time they spend their day in certain areas. But that's coming, right? We're trying to work toward that. So you can see here, and then Chair, I know you had mentioned about the some of these expenses for the pumping and whatnot, and that's what we're looking at if we were to put it in this year, this coming year, into billing, because we're working on all the contracting now, and we're not going to be able to encumber that this year. So this is where, and even the NPDES testing, we see that reflected in the budget request for 28. And so it's like a $1.6, $1.7 million potential deficit. The Galbraith, and all these different areas, we think we're going to be generating about $475,000 in revenue above expenses. There's a cash balance that we have, and that's an estimate depending on how this year finishes out, and that could be lower. So I'll have to keep working on this to provide updates. Right? This is PNS is salaries. OC is other current expenses. And so at the end, we might have like about a 400, like almost a $500,000 shortfall for this account. And these two accounts, these two revenue accounts, are under this account. So it's kind of all in. And so this is the Kauai, not Kauai, the water system account, which looks like they're putting everything into this. That's the way it's looking. And so on Kauai, we're not charging for, and again, that goes back to the question on the CAM or different things. There's no real charge for this right now. And then on Oahu, there's Waiole, and then this, of course, is an estimate of possible Waihawa irrigation revenue expenses. And these numbers are based on information we've received from, during this due diligence period, right? And so it could be, the revenue could be slightly higher or lower, expenses could be higher or lower. And then the cash balance and so on. So we're about a 1.9 million. We're expecting to be slightly, have a slightly higher cash balance for the water system account. I think I had a total. No, I did not. Okay. But, there's a $1.9 million, about a $500,000 here, about 70. So all total, we'll have a lower cash balance. But again, it depends on whether we haven't accounted for all of the legal fees and things, right? And so that could basically eat into quite a bit of that. I think I did have it on there somewhere though, right? Yeah, $900,000. Thinking that's some of the legal expenses. I think that's an estimate of what it is now, or what the liabilities will be at the beginning of the 2027 year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's going to be a real tight year.
Okay, Mark, thank you for this. And as we look at 28, 29, we're gonna need something like this as well, right?
Yes.
So some of the questions, I have, and I see Chair Watts, also has some questions too, is how did you come up? Because what you're going over right now, fiscal 27, was not something that came before this board, and
Correct.
approved by the board, or at least
Correct.
reviewed by the board. So, we need to get an understanding of, how these numbers came about in 27, but then most importantly, we're gonna have to see how these numbers are, being shown for 28, 29. So, with that said, Chair Watts, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Hinizumi. Mark, just a question. So on page 14, you guys have listed out page 14 at the top, you have listed out MPDS permit compliance fines at $12 million. How are you guys accounting for that? What is that? I don't really know exactly what that is.
Oh, okay, sorry. So this section I didn't explain. I should have explained this. So last year, last year, it's true. The board, I think we had talked to them, but the board never really had a good chance to review or approve or anything that was requested for in 27, right? Which is the budget that the legislature had worked on through this past year and is now before the governor, right? So what we did, we realized, and that was something a big that we realized that this year, that's why we're trying to get ahead so that the board can at least take a look at 28. So what you're seeing is on this sheet here is a sort of a summary of what we had put forward through DBED to be included in the admin budget. And so not all of these things were approved by the various filters, as it goes through the legislature. So we requested some of these things like land acquisition, and then this irrigation system development, and parts of the component was this. With respect to the fines, like the monitoring costs, we know is the monthly monitoring cost that's required to comply with the permit as it exists today. The moment there's a release, there's a potential for fines. So during, let's say, an event where the water breaks through the sand dam right on the beach and the water flows out, that would be considered a release, and at what point fines could be levied. The pumping of Kawaii is a daily thing, and based on what the fines could be is, and this is not a full worst case scenario, and I suppose I think the full worst case scenario could be significantly higher, but this was something that was requested. Can funding be provided? So what the legislature did is they did not provide an appropriation for that, but they were aware of it, so they increased our ceiling. So if our ceiling in this year's budget is very high, it's like 12 point something million dollars, but there was no appropriation. So in other words, because there wasn't certainty that we would get fined, so they're not going to give us an appropriation. And so it makes sense. They did not give us an appropriation because they said, hey, you don't know if you're going to get fined or not, but we'll give you the ceiling in case a fine, occurs. And then we'll just have to figure out how we cover the cost of that fine. But, otherwise, if you don't have the ceiling, you can't actually pay be above the ceiling, right? You can't spend any more. So that's what that is. But yeah, I think the worst case scenario is it's a potential of like $60,000 a day. Worst case scenario, right?
I think okay, so that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I would just, I would just kind of, and I don't know if Kelsey can help or ASO can help. I would just double, triple check that one because the proviso does still restrict that for use on land acquisition, right? So,
Well, okay, this was actually, okay, this was the request that went in from 2026 into the 2026 legislative session, but it was not given to us in the it wasn't given to us. So I realize it's a weird sort of sequence of events. So the $10 million, you're absolutely correct. Increase in ceiling that's in the current HB 1800 budget bill is specifically for land acquisition and would not apply to this for certain. But our current budget, our 2026 budget, has a $12 million ceiling. It's in change, the $12 million ceiling, but no appropriation to fund that expenditure. It was just put in there kind of like just in case.
right,
Yeah.
but if it was ever triggered, there's no money to spend, though, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Correct.
So, and what would happen at that case is if we did get that, we would request some kind of funding, and then they would either it would get approved or not, and then they would send us money our way, and then we could expend it using that ceiling. But without the ceiling, you can't expense the money.
Yeah, okay. We just gotta make sure we watch that though, because then we wouldn't be able to pay that for another year.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so in other words, for this coming year, for instance, is what you're saying, for that if we don't have enough ceiling, and we get fined, and the fine exceeds our ceiling, yes, we will. Even if we had the funds, we could not expend it. Yeah. I agree.
Well, no, but even if it was under the ceiling, we don't have the money to spend on that.
Oh, that's right. That's correct. So if we did get fined, that would be the moment where we would
help to understand that we wouldn't be fine.
Yeah, at some point we might not be able to manage that. In fact, yeah.
Yeah. So I would just maybe you might want to be proactive and work with them. I mean, hopefully there is no fines, but if should there be, I don't know if there's interest and stuff tied to that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure they understand that we are appropriations driven in a lot of ways. So we wouldn't be able to immediately respond without involving the legislature.
Yes. Yeah. It would probably be a very high level discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry. One more question. The pump. So in table 4, the pumps are in the Navy estimate of revenue expense. Is that the one pump, the $500,000?
Correct. Wait, what page is that on? Sorry.
7.
Is that on what?
The middle page 27.
27. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, so the pump, the payment, and this is an estimate, of course, right? So, typically we're thinking that the actual cost will be about $450,000. And typically, the way the contract works is there's like a 10%, administrative fee that gets paid. So we would potentially be able to bill $495,000, and so you would have a potential revenue or profit, you could say, of $45,000. That's not set yet. This is not decided. It's just an estimate, but that's what that is. That's the cost of the.
I think the previous numbers we had are over almost 2 years old, right? So we want to be careful there. I think.
Yeah. We're working on that now, trying to get, because in doing this contract, they're working. We have Ken and Austin, several staff members going through, and Kelsey is helping to put this to understand how this is done. But there's a lot of documentation on the costs, and and it's very precise in the wording. So correct. It's that's what we're estimating on what it might be. Kind of it is an estimate though. We are not including the necessarily the operation yet of the pump, but this is just replacing. We probably when we did this, I didn't put that in there, but I probably could put that in there, and it would be similar. So I think what you would see is it would be like a little almost, let's say almost doubling that, because the operation is around $490,000, $500,000.
And then one final question. I'm on the evaluation committee for the marketing thing, and I don't see the $150,000 for the PR contract.
I probably did not. Include that.
So there's a active procurement ADC is going through right now for $150,000 PR contract.
Is that we might, if we have the funds, encumber that this year, and that contract will continue through 27. If we're doing it now.
No, I think it's supposed to be executed July 1.
Okay.
Chair Watts, I think it's just an oversight. We need to add that in.
I'll add that in.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Again, thank you, staff. This is a lot of work, but as you know, very important as well. So we appreciate all the work that's been put in, and there's still lots more work to go, as you guys can see. So thank you for that. And then having no further business on this agenda, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Motion by Chair Watts, second by Deputy Director Wicker. Any objections or abstentions? Okay, hearing none, motion is unanimously approved, and this meeting is adjourned at 12:10 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.